Last Sunday, we talked about how Joseph's brothers sold him into slavery. Joseph was taken down into Egypt, and while he was there, because of his wisdom and his ability to interpret dreams, he captures the attention of Pharaoh, who makes Joseph his trusted advisor. The brother who had been discarded and sold into slavery rises to the highest ranks of political power. And Joseph, like all truly great and noble leaders, he sees any power that is bestowed upon him, he sees it as a trust, a gift, a sacred duty and responsibility to serve and to build up and not to harm, not to tear down. Joseph chooses love over retribution. I am Joseph, your brother, he says when his brothers do not recognize him. And what a reunion they have, described so beautifully. Sometimes we simply need to be reminded that we are already one, and that we really do love one another, and that is more important than all the squabbling and quarreling over who did and said what. Because much of the time in our own lives, we know this, that what's done has been done. What has not been done has not been done. What's said has been said. What's not been said has not been said. Let it be. Let it be. It was our own William Pichet de Bose who said that we have an eternity in which to continue learning and growing. And so there needn't be any regrets. There needn't be any regrets, because at death, life is changed, not ended, and love is stronger even than death. We can hold on to all the hurts if we want to, or we can dare to move on. We can move on in faith and love, in gentleness and forbearance. After the Civil War, you know that South Carolina and the rest of the South lay in ruins, as did the Episcopal Church here. The entire diocese and our very own parish. We had a stately building before the Civil War, built after the first church was lost during the Revolutionary War. The second structure was designed by the architect Robert Mills, who designed the famous fireproof building in Charleston. Looking at you, Faye Jensen. And it's where the historical records are kept for the Historical Society. Robert Mills also designed the Washington Monument. And the second St. John's structure was lost completely to a fire during the Civil War. And we were not able to rebuild here until around 1873 or so. And I find that I use the language of rebuilding a lot around here. And that's because we are always rebuilding, restoring, making what is old new again, much like you and I do throughout our lives of faith and pilgrimage, mending, healing. So after the war, the Bishop of South Carolina, he sent a priest up north with the intention of trying to raise money for our defeated, beleaguered church. And that priest was Anthony Toomer Porter. Dr. Porter, founder, as you may know, of the Church of the Holy Communion in Charleston, and founder of what would become Porter-Goud School. Well, Dr. Porter, he went everywhere. I mean, he went to England sometimes. He suffered from what we would call today depression, and it was as if those long trips were good for him, to step outside of all the daily work. And he would go on these trips to rest, but he would also raise a lot of money for the church. So he went to Washington and New York, and Dr. Porter was a most enterprising sort. In Washington, he just decided to stop by the White House one day to see President Andrew Johnson, who received him. He told him of the plight and what he was trying to do. He's trying to build a school, trying to educate these poor Southerners who had lost everything. And so President Johnson would write him a check for $1,000. At the same time, while he was with President Johnson, Porter procured a pardon for one of his parishioners, a man by the name of George Edward Trenholm. Now, Trenholm had married a woman from Johns Island, but that's not why he needed a pardon. Although maybe that's arguable. Trenholm had served as treasurer of the Confederacy during the last years of the war. There's a Trenholm Road over there off River Road by the airport. You've probably seen it. He served as treasurer of the Confederacy. It said that he'd been a blockade runner, and it said that he was one of the figures upon whom Margaret Mitchell based her character of Rhett Butler. Porter would also wrangle support from the likes of Cornelius and William Vanderbilt, as well as a fellow Episcopalian by the name of J.P. Morgan. Canon Ryan Curry and I, we owe a lot to J.P. Morgan because he set up our pension fund. So we have warm affection for him. Porter would even find support from General Sherman. Yes, the General Sherman. I'm not sure if his name's ever been uttered from this pulpit before, but ironically, and maybe this was a little guilt kicking in, I don't know, but it was Sherman himself who would see to it that the property in Charleston upon which Porter would build the school and the church, that he saw to it that the federal government signed that property over to the church for this mission. And that's, if you know, it's the Medical University has the property now. St. Luke's Chapel around there, that's where the old arsenal was. So, Porter now finds himself in New York. He's trying to break through to the Episcopalians there. He has several letters of introduction, but tensions were still running high. Why on earth would these churches in the North want to help a people that had rebelled against everything they held dear? So much destruction. And now this South Carolina priest is walking around hat in hand. But finally, Porter was able to prevail upon a couple of the clergy who heard his plight. He was invited to preach at a church in Brooklyn. So before the sermon, the rector introduced Dr. Porter. And Porter would write later, he would write that he felt pale. He felt pale as he climbed into the pulpit. And he said that he felt even more pale, and his heart began to pound as he noticed disgruntled parishioners rising from their pews to exit the church. They simply were not going to listen to this priest of the people who had brought and wrought so much destruction. upon the land. The rector, though, immediately stood up and he instructed the ushers to bar the doors to prevent his parishioners from leaving. And he told them all to sit down. He could get away with a lot back then. A scene of high drama, you can imagine. And so when Porter began to preach, he began his sermon with these words: I am Joseph, your brother. I am Joseph, your brother. The people were moved. He raised $1,000 from that one sermon in that one church. The invitations began pouring in, and he would find himself at Grace Church in New York the next Sunday. Now, while the circumstances were, of course, different, Dr. Porter was simply reminding the people that they were family, that he was their brother, no matter what. Blessed Mary, whose feast we observe today, she shows us the way. Mary, the mother of Jesus, the mother of the church, the mother of us all. She helps us to ask the question and see the truth. Who are your brothers and sisters and fathers and mothers? Whom do we need to see as forming part of the same human race as we ourselves? We can always begin again. There is redemption. There is healing. There is restoration. But first, we have to see one another as the siblings that we already are. Amen.